Can you imagine the amazing foods prisoners of war shared during Christmas of 1943? In those cold, crowded camps, each meal was a lifeline, made from scraps, traded tins, and the stubborn will to keep hope alive. What did those men taste when all they had left was faith? The shared Christmas parcel feast was the closest thing to a miracle behind barbed wire. By December 1943, every prisoner knew what that day meant. It was not about presents or trees, but about survival, dignity, and a taste of home. Red Cross parcels had trickled in for weeks, each one containing treasures: canned beef, chocolate, powdered milk, sugar, and tea. And so, on Christmas Day, entire huts pooled their supplies together into one massive, improvised feast. There were no chefs, no recipes, no ovens, just fire tins, battered pots, and a stubborn will to make something special. Men who barely spoke the same language shared food as equals. Some even shaped the biscuits into tiny decorations, a small nod to tradition. That single meal was more than food. It was hope. For a brief evening, the war paused at the edge of the camp fence. Laughter returned, and for the first time in months, the smell of something warm filled the air. It was not a holiday dinner anyone would remember for its flavor, but for its spirit. Red Cross parcel stew was the backbone of most prison camp meals, but on Christmas it became something sacred. The parcels were the prisoner's lifeline, carefully packed boxes from strangers who never met them. Inside were tins of bully beef, dried vegetables, biscuits, tea, and sometimes chocolate or jam. Nothing went to waste, and nothing was taken for granted. They would gather the ingredients, break them into small pieces, and drop everything into a communal pot. The result was a stew that somehow tasted like home. Men traded spoonfuls, added a pinch of salt if they had it, or even shared a single onion to boost the flavor. It simmered on tiny fires made from twigs and scrap wood, the smell drifting through the camp like a promise. Every bite carried warmth, salt, and gratitude. They called it a feast, but it was more than that. It was defiance, a refusal to let hunger or despair win. Red Cross parcel stew was the backbone of most prison camp meals, but on Christmas it became something sacred. The parcels were the prisoner's lifeline, carefully packed boxes from strangers who never met them. Inside were tins of bully beef, dried vegetables, biscuits, tea, and sometimes chocolate or jam. Nothing went to waste, and nothing was taken for granted. They would gather the ingredients, break them into small pieces, and drop everything into a communal pot. The result was a stew that somehow tasted like home. Men traded spoonfuls, added a pinch of salt if they had it, or even shared a single onion to boost the flavor. It simmered on tiny fires made from twigs and scrap wood, the smell drifting through the camp like a promise. Every bite carried warmth, salt, and gratitude. They called it a feast, but it was more than that. It was defiance, a refusal to let hunger or despair win. Improvised turkey stew was not made with turkey at all, but you could have fooled anyone listening to the laughter that day. Soldiers called it their holiday roast, a joke born out of necessity. They used canned meat, maybe spam or bully beef, mixed with powdered soup, bits of dried vegetables, and whatever spices could be scavenged. It was boiled until thick enough to pretend it came from a kitchen, not a tin. The smell of it alone was enough to lift spirits. It was tradition made from imagination, and that imagination mattered. They would sit in a circle, passing the stew between them, and tell stories of real Christmases, roasts, pies, and families far away. For a few minutes, the cold walls of the camp melted into warmth. It was not just about eating, it was about remembering what it felt like to belong somewhere. Sometimes, that memory tasted better than any real meal. Canned meat pie was the kind of dish that reminded prisoners of their mothers' kitchens, even if it was made from scraps. Bully beef or spam served as the filling, crushed army biscuits became the crust, and margarine from a Red Cross parcel held it all together. It baked over tin can stoves, filling the barracks with a smell so rare that it stopped conversations mid-sentence. Men who had not smiled in months grinned as they shared pieces of this strange, tin-born pie. Some joked that it could win prizes back home. Others just savoured the warmth. The crust crackled slightly when it cooled, and the taste, salty, fatty, comforting, was everything they needed to feel human again. No one called it gourmet, but to them, it was victory baked golden brown. For one night, they were no longer prisoners, just men sitting down to dinner. Victory pudding was the unofficial dessert of the camps that Christmas. It was born out of pure creativity. Biscuit crumbs, a spoon of condensed milk, a handful of raisins, and faith. The mixture was stirred together in tin mugs, pressed into shapes, and sometimes steamed over kettles to make it soft. Some men joked that they were baking victory, laughing as they mixed their rations with childlike excitement. Others closed their eyes as they stirred, imagining their wives doing the same in kitchens half a world away. Even without proper sugar, it smelled sweet and comforting. The name Victory Pudding started as a joke, but soon turned into a promise. Every man who tasted it thought of home, of holidays before uniforms and fences. Some saved a bite to eat at midnight, whispering quiet toasts for peace. The pudding was small, barely enough to fill a hand, but it filled something deeper inside. In a world where nothing was certain, the taste of sweetness felt like defiance. Spam and rice feast might not sound glamorous, but inside a camp it was royalty on a plate. Prisoners hoarded cans of spam for weeks, waiting for Christmas Day to finally open them. Mixed with bits of rice, tinned vegetables, and even a spoonful of powdered milk for creaminess, it became the centerpiece of their holiday table. Men stood over the pan as the spam browned, its salty scent filling the barracks like perfume. When they finally served it, they clapped quietly, as though they were at a dinner back home. They called it a feast because it was shared, and because it felt like plenty in a place of emptiness. The spam sizzled in battered tins until golden and crispy, and for a moment, the whole hut smelled like home cooking. Men carved it into slices, arranging it carefully like it was roast ham. It was both heartbreaking and beautiful. The desire to make something ordinary feel sacred. Food, even canned meat, became a celebration of survival. Ration biscuit pudding was a clever masterpiece of desperation. The biscuits that once broke teeth became soft and sweet with a little water, powdered milk, and a spoonful of jam. They were crushed, stirred, and baked near open flames, transforming into something almost cake-like. The men took turns watching over it as it baked, afraid to burn even a crumb. When it was ready, they cut it in perfect squares, dividing it as fairly as they could. It did not look like much, but the flavor was everything. Sweetness in a world that forgot what sugar tasted like. Men would share tiny spoonfuls, laughing quietly at how good it was compared to army rations. Some said it was the best Christmas dessert they ever had, even if it was made from crumbs. It was the spirit of invention and endurance baked into one pan. Nothing went to waste, and nothing went unappreciated. That pudding wasn't just dessert, it was morale. Chocolate bar cake was the closest thing prisoners ever had to luxury. A few lucky men had saved their Red Cross chocolate bars all month long just for Christmas. They melted them carefully over a tin cup candle flame, mixing the chocolate with crushed biscuits and powdered milk. As it melted, the smell drew others in from across the hut, everyone leaning close to watch. One man joked it looked like something from a cafe, and for a heartbeat, they all believed him. Once it cooled, it turned into a dense, rich cake, dark, sticky, and precious. Every slice was a celebration. They divided it evenly, making sure everyone got a piece, no matter how small. One man even carved a cross into the top before serving it, a quiet reminder of faith. For a brief, beautiful moment, that chocolate tasted like peace. Stewed prunes with sugar was a dish that carried memories more than flavor. Dried prunes came in the Red Cross parcels, but on Christmas they became something special. Men often joked that it was the only fruitcake they would ever see that year, and they treated it like one, decorating the tops with crumbs or chocolate flakes if they had them. Even in the cold, the steam rising from the pot smelled like home, like mornings that had not yet known war. Soaked in water overnight and simmered with a pinch of sugar, they softened into a sweet, sticky dessert that felt like nostalgia in a bowl. It reminded men of their mothers' pantries, of breakfast tables and sunlight. Some said it was better than pudding, simply because it was warm. The prunes glistened in tin cups, and sharing them felt almost ceremonial. It was not much, but in those days, not much could still mean everything. Tinned salmon loaf was one of the rarest luxuries, a dish that made men feel civilized again. When salmon tins appeared in the parcels, they were treasured like gold. On Christmas Day, prisoners mashed the salmon with biscuit crumbs, powdered egg, and a pinch of salt, forming it into a loaf that could be sliced and shared. A few even pressed the mixture into makeshift tins to give it a shape worthy of a holiday roast. The smell alone could make a man close his eyes and picture a kitchen table waiting somewhere across the ocean. Baked on tin stoves, it filled the air with the rich smell of fish and home. It was soft, tender, and full of flavor, something that felt almost too good for captivity. The loaf was passed around with quiet reverence, each man cutting his portion small enough to leave some for another. They called it the Christmas roast, even though it came from a can. That night, the salmon loaf was not just food. It was proof that even in a cage, humanity could still find grace. Potato and onion hash was one of those meals that seemed almost too simple to matter until it became a lifeline. When the guards allowed small gardens, some prisoners managed to grow onions and a few potatoes. Chopped together and fried on makeshift tins with drippings from old cans, the hash sizzled with a smell that stopped men in their tracks. They watched the pieces brown slowly, whispering jokes and stories over the crackle of grease. The sound of it cooking was enough to drown out the silence of hunger for a few minutes. It was smoky, rich, and faintly sweet. A miracle born of dirt and flame. They called it a poor man's breakfast, but on Christmas morning, it felt like a banquet. Men took turns flipping the pieces, sharing jokes while the camp wind carried the scent across the yard. Pea soup with crackers was more than a meal. It was warmth in a tin cup. The dried peas came from parcels, the crackers from military rations, and the water from whatever pot they could find to boil. Cooked slow over candle flames, it thickened into something rich and comforting. The men joked it was army green gold, a dish that could fix anything from hunger to heartbreak. They stirred it patiently, guarding the pot like treasure, because every bubble meant one more minute of comfort. The color was nothing to admire, but the smell brought men running. On Christmas Eve, they shared it in groups, breaking crackers into the soup as if it were bread in a fine restaurant. Some swore the flavor was better if you waited until it cooled. Others just gulped it down before it vanished. It filled bellies, quieted hunger, and gave the illusion of normalcy. It was peasant food turned sacred through the hands of men who had nothing left but the will to create. Boiled rice with sweetened milk was as close as most prisoners came to a real dessert. Rice was rare, but some camps traded for it or grew tiny stores of grains hidden away for special days. With powdered milk and a pinch of sugar, it transformed into a soft, creamy pudding that carried memories of family dinners and better years. The pot of rice was guarded like gold, stirred with slow reverence as the sweet smell drifted across the barracks. When it was done, the first taste always brought silence, the kind that said everything. It simmered slowly on low fires, filling the barracks with a gentle, sweet aroma. Some added bits of dried fruit or jam if they had it, but even plain, it felt like a gift. The men would divide it carefully, spoons scraping every last grain from the pot. One bite could bring both tears and laughter, because it was proof that the human spirit could turn ration dust into celebration. Cabbage stew was a dish that smelled like life returning to the body. Many camps grew their own small gardens, and cabbage was one of the few things that would thrive behind fences. Shredded and boiled with salt, a few carrots, or even a scrap of meat, it became a stew that filled the stomach and lifted the heart. Men often stood guard by the pot, stirring it gently as if it were sacred. The bubbling broth was a quiet soundtrack of hope, a rhythm that reminded them of kitchens left behind. Each rising puff of steam carried a promise that warmth, once lost, could still be found. On Christmas, it was seasoned with whatever could be found, a spoon of margarine, maybe a splash of condensed milk to thicken it. The pot would bubble slowly, and for once, there was no rush to eat. They waited, savoring the anticipation. When it was ready, the men gathered quietly, letting the steam fog their faces. It was more than food. It was warmth, community, and a faint whisper of freedom. Hardtack bread pudding might have been the most ingenious invention in the camps. Those biscuits were meant for survival, not flavor. They could break teeth if eaten plain. But with a little water, powdered milk, and a spoonful of sugar or jam, prisoners turned them into something almost magical. Some crushed the biscuits with the backs of spoons, laughing at how long it took to soften them. Others traded sugar rations just to make their pudding a little sweeter, as though they were baking for a feast. The smell of it baking on tin plates made every man forget, if only for a moment, the fences that held them in. Soaked, mashed, and baked near open flames, the hardtack transformed into a soft, sweet pudding. It was chewy, rich, and tasted faintly of caramel when toasted just right. On Christmas Day, men swapped their portions like kids trading candy. For a moment, the war fell away, replaced by laughter over a dessert that should not have been possible. It proved that even in a place designed to take everything, imagination could still win. Sweetened barley porridge was a morning ritual in some camps, especially when supplies ran low. Barley was often sent for livestock, but to starving men, it was gold. Boiled until soft and sticky, it became a breakfast that actually filled you up. They stirred it with tin spoons, counting the minutes until it thickened, savoring the rich, earthy smell. Men who had not spoken in days would suddenly talk about their favorite breakfasts back home, their voices soft but steady. The act of eating together, something so simple, became a kind of quiet resistance. Add a spoon of sugar or condensed milk, and suddenly it felt festive. It was served steaming hot in dented cups, with men huddled close for warmth. Every spoonful was slow, thoughtful, and cherished. Barley porridge might have been plain, but it carried something rich, gratitude. It tasted like the small victories that made survival possible. Condensed milk truffles were the rarest treat in captivity, a creation of genius and luck. It started with 1 can of condensed milk, saved for weeks, and a little cocoa powder from a Red Cross parcel. The mixture was stirred in tin cups until it thickened, then rolled into tiny balls with powdered biscuit crumbs. Some men moulded them into perfect spheres, calling them holiday sweets, while others shaped them into hearts or stars for luck. They laughed at how fancy they looked, pretending they were in a cafe instead of a camp. For a brief moment, everyone forgot the fences. Their world shrank to the small joy of shared sugar. They were soft, sticky, and almost unreal. On Christmas, the men passed them around, calling them truffles, as if they were back home at a holiday party. Each piece was eaten slowly, almost reverently. It was the taste of everything they missed: family, laughter, the simple joy of sweetness. In that moment, the camp didn't feel like a prison at all. Chocolate custard mix-up was exactly what it sounded like, whatever chocolate, milk and sugar they could find thrown together in a mug. Sometimes it came out as soup, sometimes as a thick paste, but no one cared. It was chocolate, and that was enough. One man's job was to stir the pot endlessly to keep it from burning, and he joked that it was the only job in camp he enjoyed. The smell spread fast, pulling everyone close like moths to a warm light. When the first spoonful hit their tongues, the taste carried them far from the cold barracks and straight into memory. The smell alone drew smiles from men who had forgotten how to smile. They would eat it straight from the pot, hot or cold, trading jokes about fancy desserts they'd had years before. Even when the texture was wrong, the feeling was right. It tasted like memory. It reminded them that sweetness, no matter how small, could still exist in the harshest corners of the world. Holiday potato cakes were a clever way to make leftovers feel festive. Mashed potatoes, flour, and a pinch of salt were mixed and fried until crisp on the outside and soft within. Sometimes a scrap of onion or margarine was added, turning simple ingredients into a golden treasure. The sound of them sizzling over makeshift stoves was the closest thing to music in the camp. They called them holiday cakes, half as a joke, half in reverence. Even the guards would pause to watch the men laugh and flip their tiny patties. It was more than food. It was the art of pretending life was normal, if only for one breakfast. Oatmeal cakes were what happened when creativity met hunger. Red Cross oats were rare, but when they arrived, they became the star of every meal. Mixed with powdered milk and fried into flat little patties, they filled the barracks with a warm, nutty smell. Some spread a thin layer of jam on top. Others ate them plain, chewing slowly to make them last. They tasted like a memory of mornings long gone. In the silence that followed, a few men closed their eyes, just to pretend they were sitting at their mother's table again. In that small, flickering moment, captivity felt far away. Carrot mash with margarine was one of those small wonders that made Christmas in the camps feel just a little brighter. Carrots were one of the few vegetables that could grow almost anywhere, even in the rough soil behind the fences. Boiled, mashed, and mixed with a spoon of margarine from Red Cross parcels, they turned into a dish both sweet and savoury. The colour alone brought life into those grey, tin-walled barracks, a bright orange reminder that nature still gave something beautiful. Men ate it slowly, savouring every mouthful as if it were fine dining. Sometimes they saved the mash to decorate other dishes, marking it as their version of a festive garnish. That simple splash of colour felt like hope spread across a plate. It was a humble food, but it brought back the memory of family dinners and holiday warmth. Carrot mash was proof that even behind barbed wire, the will to celebrate never died. Margarine toast with jam was one of the simplest but most treasured breakfasts a prisoner could have. Stale biscuits softened over heat, brushed with melted margarine, and spread thinly with jam from a Red Cross parcel. It was the closest thing to luxury. The smell of toasting biscuits filled the hut, making even guards stop for a moment. One spoon of jam could brighten an entire morning and remind men of kitchens far away. They would ration it carefully, often cutting one slice into pieces so everyone could share a taste. On Christmas morning, this small ritual felt sacred. The toast crunched softly, sweet and warm, offering comfort stronger than any sermon or speech. It was not just breakfast, it was a prayer disguised as food. Tea from burnt crumbs was as close as many came to comfort on freezing nights. Real tea was long gone, so men toasted bits of bread crust until nearly black, then steeped them in boiling water. The result was bitter, smoky, and oddly soothing. They called it camp tea and drank it with reverence, holding tin cups close to their faces for warmth. The first sip burned slightly, but it brought back memories of evenings shared with family back home. It became a nightly ritual, something steady in a world that had lost all rhythm. On Christmas night, they brewed it in larger pots, passing the tin cups around like a shared blessing. It was not the taste that mattered. It was the quiet unity it gave them, sip by sip. Barter coffee substitute was a treasure earned, not given. Some camps traded with guards or workers for roasted barley, chicory, or even burnt corn, which they ground and brewed like coffee. The aroma was enough to make grown men tear up. The first taste was earthy and strange, but it hit the soul the way only coffee could. It reminded them of mornings before the war, of waking up with purpose instead of despair. On Christmas Day, they brewed it thicker and sweeter, sharing small cups between dozens of hands. For a few moments, they felt civilized again, awake, alert, and human. It was not coffee, but it did what coffee always had. It started the day with hope. Powdered milk cocoa was one of the most beloved holiday drinks behind enemy lines. It began with powdered milk, sugar, and a sliver of chocolate melted over a tin flame. Mixed together, it created a thin but comforting cocoa that tasted faintly like home. For many, it was the first real sweetness they had in months, and they sipped it slowly, eyes closed, pretending to be anywhere else. Some men even saved crumbs of biscuit to dip in it, just to stretch the experience. Christmas mornings were quieter with cocoa. No singing, no shouting, just the sound of spoons clinking and the faint hum of gratitude. It was warmth in liquid form, the kind that thawed the coldest parts of the soul. Chocolate drink with biscuits was the closest thing to dessert a camp could offer. Red Cross chocolate, melted with hot water and whisked with powdered milk, made a thin drink that felt like velvet to men who had forgotten softness. Saved biscuits were dipped slowly into the cup until soggy, eaten carefully like fine pastries. Each dunk was an act of patience and reverence for what little sweetness remained in the world. They called it evening tea, though everyone knew it was something better, a final comfort before sleep. Laughter often followed the first sip, quiet and contagious, echoing softly through the barracks. It was small, simple joy, but it felt enormous. Turnip soup was not a favorite, but it was one of the few things that kept men alive. When potatoes ran out, turnips filled their place, diced and boiled until soft. Its flavor was sharp and earthy, but when hunger ruled, it became gold. Sometimes the men joked that it was Christmas stew, ladled into tin mugs like fine restaurant fare. Even bitterness could taste like gratitude when it meant one more day alive. They ate in silence, steam rising through the cold air, faces lit by firelight and stubborn determination. The soup might have been humble, but the resilience it represented was extraordinary. Apple jam sandwiches were a luxury almost no one forgot. Once in a while, the Red Cross parcels included tins of apple jam, and the men would guard them like treasure. Spread between 2 pieces of stale bread or biscuit, it became a feast. That first bite was enough to make you close your eyes. It was bright, tangy, and familiar. One jar could unite an entire hut in shared laughter and sticky fingers. They cut the sandwiches into slivers so everyone got a piece, saving one for later like a secret. Christmas in the camps was measured not by gifts, but by the sweetness of apple jam. Bully beef casserole was the definition of making do. Bully beef, the salty canned meat every soldier knew too well, was chopped and mixed with powdered soup, a few vegetables, and biscuit crumbs. Cooked slowly over makeshift stoves, it thickened into something hearty. They called it Christmas roast, though everyone knew it was anything but. Still, the smell of it cooking brought smiles, the kind born from memory, not luxury. It was shared straight from the pot, steam rising like incense over tired faces. The casserole filled bellies and lifted spirits. It was proof that a meal did not need to be fancy to be sacred. Macaroni surprise was the final act of ingenuity that ended Christmas dinner in many camps. Pasta was almost mythical, traded from Italian prisoners or scrounged from guards' leftovers. Boiled, mixed with canned meat or powdered cheese, it became the surprise. No one cared what was inside. It was hot, it was filling, and it was shared among friends. For a moment, it tasted like the future, like something beyond fences and frost. Men ate it slowly, savoring the rare chance to feel full. It was not about the food, it was about what it represented. Hope, shared through spoons and silence on a Christmas that was never forgotten. If these stories of Christmas behind the wire moved you, share your thoughts below. Give this video a bit of warmth with a like, and subscribe so we can keep uncovering the forgotten meals that fed the human spirit when the world was at war.